Ever wondered about the hidden triggers of trauma that autistic children experience?
Yeah, it's something we don't talk about enough.
Well, we're diving deep today into 6 of them.
Pulling them straight from an article called Six Unknown Autistic Childhood Trauma Triggers.
By Cheat ABA.
It's fascinating stuff. It really gets you thinking beyond the obvious. Like, bullying is definitely traumatic,
Right.
but these triggers are often woven into everyday life.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes them so impactful.
Absolutely.
So first up, we have sensory overload.
Okay.
Now, we all know it can be overwhelming, right?
Sure.
But this article really goes deeper into explaining how it can actually become traumatic.
Especially for children.
Yeah, because think about it.
Yeah, you're right. Imagine a child, maybe they're in a busy supermarket.
Oh, yeah.
You've got those fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, announcements blaring on the loudspeaker, the constant squeak of shopping carts.
Oh, the word.
And all that sensory input triggers that fight or flight response.
Right, like any other threat,
Exactly. But they're stuck. They can't just escape.
especially as a young child.
Right. They might not even have the words to express what they're feeling.
That's so scary.
It is. And if it keeps happening over and over,
It can be really terrifying.
it really can.
And then you layer on social rejection.
Right. Our next trigger.
We've all been there.
We have.
But for autistic children who may already feel different, it can cut even deeper.
Yeah. Think about it.
If you're already struggling to understand social cues,
Right. Constantly misinterpreting signals.
every interaction can feel like a minefield,
It really can. And when rejection happens,
whether it's from peers or even adults.
well-meaning adults.
It can be really hard.
Yeah. It feels like confirmation that you're fundamentally flawed,
Totally.
isolating you even further.
It's like showing up to a party where everyone knows this secret language, but you don't.
Exactly. And you want to connect. You crave that sense of belonging. But it's just out of reach.
The harder you try, the more out of place you feel.
Exactly. And then on top of all that, you add routine disruption, which is our next trigger.
It can be devastating.
Really think about a child who relies on a visual schedule.
Oh, like picture cards for each activity.
Exactly. Breakfast, brushing teeth, playtime, getting dressed.
It gives them a sense of order.
Yeah, some predictability in a world that can feel chaotic.
And then someone comes in and just changes it all up.
Without warning.
The routine is totally disrupted.
And the child is left feeling completely lost and bewildered.
It's like pulling the rug out from under them.
It really is.
Like if someone reorganized your entire to-do list without telling you.
Exactly. That feeling amplified 100-fold.
Yeah, you start to understand the impact.
On a child who depends on that structure for their emotional well-being.
And then that need for structure and predictability can actually lead to masking and camouflaging.
Our next trigger.
It's where autistic children learn to suppress their natural behaviors.
And mannerisms just to fit in.
It's like they're constantly putting on a performance,
Trying to appear normal.
even though it's so draining.
Take stimming, for example. It's a natural way for autistic people to regulate their sensory input.
Repetitive movement sounds visual stimulation.
But it can be perceived as weird or distracting,
And so many autistic children learn to mask it.
even though it's exhausting.
It takes a toll on their well-being.
It really does.
It's just heartbreaking to think about a child having to hide such an essential part of themselves,
To be accepted.
like being told that who you are at your core is wrong or unacceptable.
A message that can have long-lasting consequences.
For sure. And then sadly, that often makes them targets for bullying,
Right.
which is never okay.
Never.
But for an autistic child who's already struggling to navigate social situations and manage sensory input,
It can be absolutely devastating.
imagine a child who stims by flapping their hands being mocked and ridiculed by classmates.
Or a child who struggles with eye contact being labeled as rude,
It just reinforces that feeling of being different,
isolating them even further.
eroding their self-worth.
It's like being trapped in a hall of mirrors, with each reflection distorting your self-image until you no longer recognize yourself.
That's a powerful image.
And then, to make matters worse, we come to what might be the most insidious trigger of all.
Unmet needs.
And the trauma of invalidation?
This is where it gets really complex.
It does. Autistic children, like all children, have a fundamental need to be seen, heard, and understood.
Of course.
But because their needs and ways of communicating might be different, they often face a wall of misunderstanding and frustration.
It's like speaking a different language,
You're trying to express your needs, your thoughts, your feelings,
and no one understands you.
and it can make you feel like you're invisible.
Like your experiences don't matter.
Absolutely. And if that happens over and over,
Especially during those early years.
it can have a really deep impact.
So we've got this really complex interplay of sensory overload, social rejection, routine disruption, masking bullying and unmet needs, all contributing to the potential for trauma in autistic children.
You do. It's really eye-opening to see these everyday experiences through this new lens. And I think the key takeaway here is that what might seem like a minor inconvenience to a neurotypical person
Yeah.
can be a major stressor for an autistic child.
Right.
And when these stressors pile up,
It can have a profound impact.
both in the short term and long term.
Okay, so we've laid out these triggers.
We have.
Now let's explore how these early experiences can have a ripple effect throughout their lives.
Sounds good to me.
We've just uncovered these 6 often overlooked trauma triggers for autistic children
Right now, let's shift gears a little.
and explore how these early experiences can actually have a ripple effect throughout their lives.
It's like a seed planted in the soil, you know?
Yeah.
Even if you can't see it right away, it's taking root
Right.
and shaping the way the plant grows.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, so childhood trauma, especially when it goes unaddressed, can really have a lasting impact on an individual's mental, emotional, and even physical health.
We've all heard about the link between childhood trauma and mental health conditions like anxiety and depression.
For sure.
But what's particularly interesting is how this connection plays out in the context of autism.
Right, because for someone on the autism spectrum, those everyday stressors we talked about,
Yeah.
they can be amplified.
Leading to more frequent and intense experiences of those things.
Anxiety meltdowns, even shutdowns.
It's like the nervous system is just constantly on high alert.
Yeah, bracing for the next perceived threat.
And it's not just about the immediate emotional response either.
No, it's not.
This constant state of stress can actually change the way the brain develops,
Wow.
impacting things like emotional regulation, social skills, and even executive functioning.
It's like building a house on shaky ground,
Yeah.
you know? You might be able to patch things up for a while,
Right.
but without a strong foundation, it's going to be more vulnerable to future storms.
So we're talking about this cascade of potential challenges.
Stemming from these early trauma triggers.
But here's the good news.
Okay.
Awareness is the first step towards change.
Absolutely.
By understanding these triggers, we can start to create environments that are more supportive and less likely to be traumatic for autistic children.
I completely agree. It starts with education. The more we understand about autism, the better equipped we are to recognize those signs of trauma.
And then provide appropriate support.
Exactly. This goes for parents, educators, therapists, really anyone who interacts with autistic children.
I'm thinking about sensory overload, for example. Imagine a classroom where the lights are dimmed. There's a quiet corner with sensory tools available, and the teacher is really mindful of noise levels and transitions.
Yeah, that's a world of difference compared to a chaotic, overstimulating environment.
Right. It's about creating spaces that are designed with neurodiversity in mind.
And it's not just about physical spaces. It's
Right.
about fostering a culture of understanding and acceptance where autistic children feel safe to be themselves.
Systems and all.
Exactly. Which brings us to another critical piece of the puzzle.
Communication.
We've talked about how unmet needs can be a significant source of trauma.
But how do we bridge that communication gap when autistic children might express their needs differently?
It's about being patient, observant, and willing to adapt, recognizing that communication isn't always verbal.
So pay attention to those nonverbal cues.
Body language, facial expression,
Explore alternative forms of communication.
like visual supports or assistive technology.
It's like learning a new language,
You might not understand every word at first.
but with patience and practice.
You can start to have those meaningful conversations.
And as we improve communication, we can better understand those individual needs.
And provide the right support.
And that's where personalized care comes in.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to supporting autistic children. Each individual is unique with their own strengths, challenges, and sensitivities.
So we're talking about moving away from that deficit-based model where we focus on fixing what's perceived as wrong,
Right.
and instead embracing a strengths-based approach where we celebrate neurodiversity and provide individualized support that empowers autistic children to thrive.
Exactly. It's about shifting our perspective from what's wrong with you to what do you need to succeed.
I love that. And it's about recognizing that support doesn't stop at childhood.
No, it doesn't.
The effects of trauma can linger.
And autistic individuals might need ongoing support as they navigate the challenges of adulthood.
So that's where creating a trauma-informed society becomes crucial.
Promoting awareness of trauma and its impact, providing access to mental health services, and fostering empathy and understanding in all aspects of life.
I love that. It's about weaving compassion into the very fabric of our communities.
And it's about advocating for systemic change.
pushing for policies that support neurodiversity.
From education to employment to healthcare.
It's a big task,
It is.
but it's a worthy one. So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about the lasting impact of trauma, the importance of creating supportive environments, and the power of personalized care.
Right.
But there's one more crucial piece we need to explore.
Okay, what's that?
The role of autistic voices in this conversation. So we've talked about those 6 trauma triggers and their lasting impact. But something we haven't fully explored yet is the importance of listening to autistic voices themselves.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's so crucial to remember that we're talking about real people here.
With diverse experiences.
And perspectives.
Yeah, the autistic community isn't a monolith.
Not at all. We
Yeah.
need to move beyond those generalizations and create space for individual stories.
To be heard.
Exactly.
And I've been thinking about how we often talk about autism through this deficit-based lens,
Yeah, focusing on the challenges.
Well, it's perceived as lacking.
Right. But what if we shifted our perspective?
What if we started seeing autistic traits as strengths?
I love that. Imagine a world where we actually value autistic ways of thinking, communicating, experiencing the world.
Where sensory sensitivities aren't a burden, but a heightened awareness of subtle details.
That others might miss.
And stimming isn't a distraction.
But a vital form of self-regulation.
And expression. I mean, think about the incredible contributions autistic individuals have made in fields like science, technology, art activism.
Their unique perspectives and ways of approaching problems have led to breakthroughs and innovations.
That have enriched our world.
Then it's not just about celebrating those who fit into our preconceived notions of success, either.
Right.
Every autistic person has something valuable to offer.
Regardless of their abilities or challenges.
Absolutely.
So how do we create this world where autistic voices are not just heard,
Yeah.
but truly listened to?
And valued.
Yeah.
I think it starts with humility, We need to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers.
Right.
We need to be willing to learn from autistic people about their lived experiences, their needs and aspirations.
So actively seeking out autistic voices.
Yes, reading books and articles written by autistic authors, watching documentaries, listening to podcasts created by autistic people, following autistic advocates and self-advocates on social media.
And when you have the opportunity to engage in conversation with an autistic person,
Be present, be respectful, and most importantly, be a good listener.
don't interrupt.
Don't try to fix them.
Don't speak for them.
Just listen.
I think that's a powerful message.
Mhm.
Listening is an act of empathy, a way of saying, I see you, I hear you, and I value your perspective.
And that validation, that sense of being seen and understood can be incredibly healing.
Especially for those who have experienced trauma.
As a result of feeling invisible or unheard.
So to our listener, we encourage you to continue this exploration. Dive deeper into the world of autistic experiences. Challenge your own assumptions and biases. Be an ally, an advocate, a voice for inclusion.
And remember, creating a truly inclusive world is an ongoing process. It's about making space for all voices, celebrating neurodiversity, and recognizing that everyone deserves to feel safe, valued, and empowered to be their authentic selves.
We hope this deep dive has given you a new understanding of autistic childhood trauma and inspired you to take action. Thanks for joining us.